Hold on a sec. Show. Need to. Slideshow. You show. There we go. Beauty. Who here has made maple syrup? Anybody? No? Oh. Who here has made choke cherry syrup? Okay. So you start with a bunch of choke cherries, add sugar, add water, boil it down, filter it. Maple syrup is really unique because it only comes from maple trees. And traditionally, a lot of that is sugar maple. Does sugar maple grow in North Dakota? Is it native to North Dakota? No. What's our native maple? Box elder. Box elder, also called Manitoba maple. And can you make good maple syrup from it? Yes, you can. All right, absolutely. So let me turn off subtitles. All right. So I grew up in Chardon, Ohio. Chardon is the maple syrup capital of Ohio in Geauga County. Oh, isn't that interesting? How do I turn that off? Wow. Try it again. Excellent. That was really weird. I've never seen that before. Okay. I grew up in Chardon, Ohio, Geauga County, the maple syrup capital. And it's really a unique place off Lake Erie there because the soil or the ground rises up to 1,500 feet above sea level. And we're in the heart of the snow belt off of Lake Erie. You ever hear about Buffalo, New York every winter? And they get dumped on with 3 feet of snow. Well, that actually starts on the east side of Cleveland and runs through my hometown. And that makes for a very unique forest. There's a lot of sugar maple in the northern hardwood forest. And we had the Geauga County Maple Festival every year. And my sister was the queen in 1975. So I can't wait for 3 more years when I can give her crap and say, hey, you were the queen 50 years ago. So, now, me and my brothers and my sisters and the neighbors, we collected sap and made maple syrup. And for us, it was really a way to keep the kids busy. There wasn't anything about production. We weren't trying to make huge vats of it. We weren't trying to sell. It was a great way to keep a bunch of kids busy. But it's a really unique process, okay, because like most any product, you have a very narrow window when you can harvest. You collect sap in the spring. Does anybody know when in the spring? What conditions?
When it gets above freezing during the day and below freezing at night.
Above freezing during the day and below freezing at night. And it's got to be even beyond that a little more. If it was like 33 in the day and only 31 at night, it's really not enough of a difference to cause any kind of sap flow. But generally, yeah, that's what it is. And how long does those conditions last in North Dakota in the spring? 2 days. 2 days, okay, but then it gets cold again, and then we might get those conditions again. Somewhere maybe 4 weeks, 6 at the most. You know, we get this very narrow window of time. Just like planting, just like harvesting. Yeah, Daryl.
Isn't that across the nation? Wouldn't that be similar though? I mean, even in the maple syrup capital of Ohio, how long is the window there?
It's a little bit broader. It is. Here I think we're closer to that 4-week window.
Oh, okay.
The further north we get, it's like we go winter, winter, summer. You know, our springs are very quick.
Yeah.
So it's funny. My brother taps 4 or 5 trees at home, and next year I'm hoping to get him up here to help me, and he'll be done by the time I start. So it'll be perfect. So days above freezing, nights below freezing, and then you stop when the trees, when the buds start to grow, when the leaves start to grow. The sap stops flowing, for one thing, or what sap you do get, it's actually off taste. Doesn't taste good. They say buddy. So that's when you stop collecting sap. So first thing, collect sap, which is sugar water, essentially. You concentrate that sugar, and You put it in a package, okay. Bottle it up. And there's actually a few little tips or tricks that I'm still learning about that. So, what tree species? Sugar maple has generally the highest concentration of sugar in its sap. Box elder is pretty close behind. Depending where you are, box elder might actually be a little bit more sugar than sugar maple, depending where you are. And other maples, silver maple. Some people make maple syrup out of silver maple. Generally, the sugar concentration is lower, but every now and again, you find a tree with good sugar concentration. How much sugar comes out of a tree? What concentration? Any ideas? Somewhere between, generally between 2 and as much as 6% sugar in the sap. Sometimes it's a little lower. Rarely is it that high. But we'll talk more about that in a little bit. If you're looking for sugar maple, how do you identify sugar maple? Well, opposite branching, of course. Pointy buds. Pointy buds. I tell people, what's the ice cream cone at the point? It's a sugar cone, as opposed to the flat bottom cake cone, plain cone. Sugar maple, sugar cone, pointy buds. There's a little close up. Because we do have some in North Dakota. I don't know of anybody tapping sugar maple in North Dakota, but people plant them as ornamentals in town. I don't know that I've seen a shelter belt with sugar maple. Okay. The other thing about sugar maple, not native to North Dakota, does so-so here, especially in the Red River Valley. They get about this big and then they start to die. They crap out. They're very demanding tree species, site demanding. So they prefer moist soils that are well drained. Wet but well drained. Good luck finding that. Okay, that is really tough. That's where they do the best. If you look at the native range of sugar maple, there it is. I live right here, right on the very western edge of the range. You go 10 miles west from where I live, it doesn't occur anymore. Okay, South Dakota. Has anybody ever been to Sitchi Hollow? Yeah, that's the sugar maple there. It's really cool. I would love to go down there and tap trees or look at the genetics of that, see why it's different. That's kind of in the middle of nowhere. Isolated from other sugar maples. That shows it in North Dakota. I don't know, the Coteau there, what is that? Well, the hills that come down, they barely get into North Dakota. The Sisseton Hills, they barely get into North Dakota. So I don't think we have sugar maples being native to North Dakota. Okay, box elder, also called box elder maple, Manitoba maple, does great here. Great shelter belt tree. You want to put it in your yard? Not so much. Who here has not planted box elder? Okay, just one. It does well throughout the state. Yeah, structurally it falls apart, goes everywhere, but that's okay for a shelter belt. Also called Manitoba maple. How do we tell it? Of course, that white, blue, purple, glaucous twig. There's this white waxy substance on the twig. And sometimes you can get twigs this long. It grows like crazy. Opposite branching, and it's a compound leaf. The bud is way back there on the twig. Those are little leaflets. And it's funny because, okay, here's another question. Who here has mistaken this thinking it was poison ivy? Oh, just me? Come on. I'll go up there and go, whoa, wait, that's poison ivy. And then I look closer, and it's just a small leaf that happens to have 3 leaflets. Got to look close for that. Yeah, be careful. Yeah, if you do it the other way around, oh, this is, nah, never mind. This is box elder. Blah. No. One thing about box elder is it has separate male and female trees, and I really like to know, and I wish I knew this, which one produces better sap. Better sap being more sap and or higher sugar. The male or the female, I don't know. Okay, the box elder bark, sometimes confused with green ash. Who here has confused the two of them? A mature tree. I have. Yeah, I have. I hate to admit it, but it's true. Silver maple, silver maple's interesting in North Dakota. It can grow to be a very big tree. You know, you find this in the eastern U.S. on river bottoms. Okay, so it's a water-loving species. Yet we bring it out here onto the prairie. You know what? It can do okay. If it doesn't get chlorotic, it can do okay. And can you make sap from it? Yes. Or sorry, syrup from it? Yes. I really wonder about how much sugar content there is. The other thing about silver maple, if you're making syrup from it, they say it has a little more of a vanilla flavor. Now, for me, I don't have a sensitive palate. Okay, to me, I get the sugar and kind of a smoky flavor, and I'm in heaven. That's great. Beyond that, I can't pick up these subtle flavors. So it's got to be really strong. Okay, so 2 to 6%, yeah, it's kind of variable. And sugar maple, I'm talking with some folks out by where I live, they're at 3% or more on their trees per average. They actually measure it, each tree. No, I take that back. They haven't measured it. They have measured it in the past. Ever been to maple sugaring days at Fort Stevenson? Anybody? Okay, they're making box elder maple syrup every spring. Have been for at least 7 years, maybe even longer. I'm supposed to get some data from their guy up there. And he's in the range of about 2 to 2.5% on his box elder trees. He measures the sugar content of each of his trees every year. And there's one tree that's always higher than the others. It varies from year to year, but there's one tree that's the sweet one. So maybe we should start breeding that tree and other sweet box elder trees, build up sugar concentration. Okay. There's lots of variability, and you can, for only $60, you can get a refractometer, which will help you measure sugar. And you can also measure salt concentration with it too. Anybody ever use a refractometer? Yes. What did you use it for? Grapes. Measuring sugar and other solutes in the grape juice. Yeah, cool. That's awesome. That's the one I was looking for. That I bought one of these when I came to NDSU 20 years ago, and I haven't seen it in 19 years. So it's in a box somewhere. I had these great ideas back then, and they're finally coming through. Okay, so we start by collecting the sugar, the sugary sweet sap from the tree. Then what do we do, or how do we do that? Well, you got to drill a hole in the tree. When I was growing up, it was a ship auger bit and a brace. You know, just cranking it in there. Go about an inch, inch and a half into the tree. Inch and a half, 2 inches. Nowadays, use a power drill or a good carbide bit. Generally, 5/16 inch is the size of the hole because it's the size of the spile you put in, the spout. Again, in the old days, we were using 7/16. So it depends what you use. But I will say, go slow. You know, you got your drill, you just want to crank through it. You put it on as fast as you can, you drill into it. We've made that mistake once. When I was in graduate school and in college, we were tapping about 50 trees. And boy, we just cranked on those. And that really sealed off the hole inside. So you want to go nice and slow as you're drilling in. Okay. Oh, the other thing, slight upward angle, just a little bit, to allow that sap to drip out. So you got a hole in a tree and the water's running out. How do you collect? Or how much do you do? Okay. Generally, if a tree is about 12 inches diameter to maybe up to 18, we'll put 1 tap per tree because you don't want to over-harvest. You don't want to stress out that tree. Anybody raise bees? Honeybees? Okay. You don't want to take too much honey from the bees because you want them to have enough for winter. So if the tree is less than 12 inches, it's not big enough to tap. That'd be too much of a stress. If it's bigger than 18 inches, go with 2 taps. Back where I grew up, we would get trees that were like 28 inches or bigger sometimes. They were just big, monstrous old trees, and they would sometimes do 3, but we don't have that around here. Okay. And then you put in a spile. Whoop, wrong pocket. I have a spile. Anybody have a spile in their pocket? I do. Somewhere. Probably. I had one this morning. There it is. Spile, a spout. This goes into the tree. And you attach it to tubing. The old style, I'll come back to this. The old style, you'd actually hook a bucket on there. And depending, if Jeff Miller was here, I could tease him mercilessly. Because this is the Jeff Miller spile. Anybody know Jeff Miller? Yeah. Can you picture him doing this? Yeah. Jeff's a very self-sufficient guy. Yeah, really traditional, hand-whittled. Okay, so this is how my brother does it at his place. You put the spile in the hole that you drilled. You attach tubing to it. And you let that drip into a bucket. When the bucket fills up, you collect the sap. Pretty straightforward.
Is there a specific height off the ground you're supposed to put that spile?
No, something convenient for you that will allow it to flow. Anywhere from 2 feet to maybe 4 feet, somewhere in that range. And if you're doing this for 2 or 3 or 4 years in a row, try to go opposite. Maybe not directly opposite, maybe 2/3 of the way around the tree, and then another 2/3, and then you'll be back to a third. Then you'll be back to your starting point in the 3rd year. But then avoid it by, there are some rules. I want to say it's at least 4 inches to the side and at least 6 inches high or low. So you don't want to be right on that same hole over time. And a tree will heal over that wound. A healthy tree will heal over that wound in 1 year, maybe 2 years. 2 years at the most. So yeah, you're creating a wound, but the tree will cover that over very quickly. A healthy tree will. My brother's been tapping these trees for, I'll say 8 or 10 years. Okay, he even planted some of these years ago. Tells you how old my brother is. Yeah, and that tree has 2 buckets on it. It's big enough. Now the folks out by me, they're doing a whole forest, sugar maple forest, and they've got lines. They don't have buckets. They got spiles that go into a collector line, and they're all going downhill, and they get a big collector tank at the bottom, and then they pump it out of the tank up to another tank up where they're boiling the sap. So yeah, it can be as simple or as complicated as you want.
It doesn't freeze?
It can freeze, but a couple things. Sugar or salt, anything that you put in water that dissolves in water is going to lower the freezing point. So it's usually not a problem. And anyway, if it happens to freeze in a bucket, go left. If it happens to freeze in the bucket, then we just pull that out and toss it because it doesn't have any sugar in it. So that's not a bad thing. And it's not going to freeze those lines and break them. The lines are some type of plastic that's flexible enough that it's not a problem. Good question. Good question. You would think that the deer would bother the lines. They haven't said that they do. You know what bothers the lines? Sometimes squirrels. They go in, they're looking for sugar water, and they'll sometimes chew through these to get the sugar. Little boogers. So this is in that forest. They got these lines leading into large collector lines, and apparently the big Rubbermaids are actually food safe. Something about them. And then they collect in the big garbage cans, and then they go to a big collector tank, and then they run a pump. And it's really crazy because these big operations that have the lines all going downhill, it's great. They sometimes actually put a vacuum on the tree to pull that sap out even quicker. And you got to be careful. You got to be careful that you don't stress the tree by taking too much. And I'm sure these people are in it for the long haul and they know that, but just something you got to be careful about. I've never seen a vacuum system out here. Okay. So you've got this sugary sap. Now you've got to concentrate the sugar. How would you do that? could freeze it and take off some of that by just getting rid of that ice. Concentrate the sugar. The sugar needs to go from that 2 to 6% up to about 67%. There's a little narrow window there, 66 to 68.5, I think. How would you do that? How do you concentrate sugar? Boil, boil, boil. And yeah, traditionally, that's what you do. It's just, you start, we used to, when I was in college, we had these 30 to 50 trees in the one woodlot there at Michigan State that we were allowed to do, the students were allowed to do. And we'd go out in the evening after classes, and we'd have a fire in the woods, and we'd sit and drink beer all night. It was a lot of fun. But we would go till midnight, 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning. We were a lot younger then. So you boil it, and you can do a batch. Okay, you can get a pan, get a stainless steel pan, and put it over some type of boiler. And this is actually from Jesse Kist here in Bismarck. I think he's trying to keep himself busy, and or his kids aren't quite old enough yet. But that's what he does. He's got a big pan that he puts on there, and he feeds wood into that boiler, into that drum, and sits there and boils it off. My brother does this. A little propane burner. But I have to say I really need to talk to my brother because he's the flame there is open. It's like, dude, keep the heat in. I don't know why he doesn't have something built around it to keep the heat in. So my brother gets it close, and then he takes his batch into the house, and he finishes it off on the stove. Okay. So, and actually, he freezes it and then melts it again when he has time. Then he finishes it off. So he might get it to like 60% sugar outdoors, and maybe that last 7% indoors. If you really, really want to get into it and spend many, many thousands of dollars on one of these pieces of equipment, okay, the evaporators, the modern evaporators are really slick, and it's a continuous feed system that the sap comes in here and it goes around and around the series of baffles, and then it comes down into this lower pan, and eventually there's an outlet. Actually, I think the outlet, that's either here or off the screen there. And it starts out as sap, and it goes through this system, and as it's going through this system, more water boils off, and by the time it gets down to the end, it's syrup or awfully close. And if you want to see one of these in action, go up to, again, Fort Stevenson State Park, second Saturday of April, and you can see this. They've got a small hobby-sized system. I'm guessing it's not even as big as this table. So that's traditional how you do it. Modern way, reverse osmosis. Okay, so this is a system, again, by those folks out by me that I want to say they spent 20 grand on it because they're processing hundreds of gallons of sap a day. Or you can go with the RO bucket, which I just purchased this 2 weeks ago for $375. Good picture? Hope it turns out. And it's an RO system, reverse osmosis. Who here uses reverse osmosis for water and for their home drinking water? Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do, because there's otherwise too much salt from the softener. It works great. Works great. You put pressure behind this solution, it goes through a membrane, and the clean water comes through the membrane. The concentrate stays on this side of the membrane, and you eject that off to a side, and it gets sweeter and sweeter. And you can go start out at about 2%, 2 or 3%, and you can get it as high as 8% or maybe even 10 or 12% sugar. And the advantage is it saves you time during boiling. Okay, it saves a boatload of time. It can cut your boiling time in half. Okay. As high as I've heard as high as 15%, but I've never seen it. And boil, boil, boil. Okay, boiling water produces a lot of steam. So beware of that. Okay, you're doing this in your kitchen, there's going to be a lot of steam for hours on end. Okay, Like I said, you start out at 4% sugar and you're going up to 67% sugar. How do you measure that? Well, there's a couple different ways. Traditionally, the way is actually, you know it's sugar, or so you know it's syrup when it boils at 7 degrees above the boiling point of water. Okay. What does that mean? What does water boil at? 212. Okay. So in theory, 219. If you took your kitchen thermometer, your kitchen thermometer, your kitchen thermometer, and we all put them in a pan of boiling water, would they all read the same thing? Probably not. Yeah, probably not. There's differences in thermometers, how they're calibrated. Sometimes there are differences in elevation, and sometimes there are even slight differences with high pressure, low pressure systems coming through. So calibrate your thermometer and then add 7 degrees. So let's see if this works. I'm gonna even closer now. Come up a degree. And this year, water boils here at 211 instead of 210 like it has in previous years. So taste and feels done, but we're waiting to 218. Okay. And we'll be done. Okay. Did anybody hear it? Did you hear it, Ryan? Yeah. Okay, that was my brother. His thermometer read 217, and he said this year his thermometer, the boiling water, was at 211, so he's waiting for 218. He also said it looks and feels like it's done. It looks and feels. It was very interesting when I was in college and we're doing this outdoors in the middle of the night and drinking a beer or two. And we got our flashlights on this boiling pan of syrup. What do you see? How can you tell? I'm going to try playing it again. Even closer now. Come up a degree. Is there anything in particular that catches your eye? What's that?
Not splashing.
Not splashing, that's true. Bubbles. What about them? It was very interesting. The more you do this, very quickly you learn when the bubbles get really small, you know you're close. And that's what it was. You know, we're out in the middle of the woods. We didn't have a thermometer with us. You know, we got it close out in the woods and then we take it inside and finish it like he did on a pot on the stove. It's very quick. Very quickly we figured it out. It was very interesting. All right, really small bubbles. So you could do the 7 degrees above the boiling point of water. You could do this density with a hydrometer. What else do we use hydrometers for? In soils class? Remember? Soil moisture? No? Oh, that's not.
Is it the electric conductivity?
What's that?
Is it the electric conductivity?
No, not electric conductivity. You remember the Voyakos hydrometer method for doing soil texture? Oh, okay, maybe not. Okay, it's a density method, and there's a specific density that that syrup has. There's also some differences depending on temperature, and the modern hydrometers are calibrated to work with different temperatures of syrup. All right. How are we doing on time? Package, okay, 3:10. All right, packaging, storage. Okay, now you've got this syrup, and you know, hey, let's just start looking at it. Filter. Okay, get the bugs and crud out. And usually the bugs and crud aren't too bad, but there's all kinds of cloth filters you can use. There's sometimes sugar sand. It's a calcium compound that'll form, and you want to get that out as well. Sometimes it's there. Sometimes they use even a filter press with a pump pressing it through the filter. And again, these are the folks who are doing this professionally over by me. And everything there is food grade in their place, and it's pretty amazing. And you bottle it up. Lots of options. Okay, if anybody's going to go into the business of maple syrup production and you want to actually sell, there are some certain rules you have to follow. But the labeling, pure maple syrup, pure maple syrup, pure maple syrup. And the only thing allowed to say pure maple syrup is pure maple syrup. Okay? Log cabin syrup is not maple syrup. It is corn syrup that's dyed to look like this stuff, like the real stuff. Years ago, I bought a bottle of Canadian maple syrup, and yeah, it was good. And I don't know what their rules are. It's interesting. The maple syrup industry is really dominated by Quebec. Who knew? You'd think it'd be the U.S., Vermont, you know, everything, Vermont maple syrup. It's really Quebec that's the big producer. And U.S. states, of course, Vermont, Wisconsin, New York, some of these northern states. Sugar maple does get a little far south, but they're really not making maple syrup. One thing, this is what my brother does, it's Ohio maple syrup. That's special. It's like canning. Okay, you do your canning in the water bath and you pull it out, and sometimes you leave the jar upside down. So that's what he does here. So lots of options. You got to package it hot while it's greater than 180 degrees. You can let it cool down a little bit before you package it, but it's got to be packaged hot because otherwise you could get mold. I mean, this stuff is 67% sugar. What's going to grow in that? Not a whole lot, but if it can grow in it, stuff can grow in it if it's not packaged right. And you store it in a cool area away from light, away from sunlight. And if you open it up, it should be good for up to a year in the fridge. So that's just fine. I've used stuff that's been, out of the, been opened longer than a year, but usually ours doesn't last that long. Okay. Oh, and you sometimes get sugar crystals in the bottom. Okay, what do you do if you get sugar crystals in the bottom of your honey?
Microwave it.
What's that?
You warm it up.
You warm it up. Did you say microwave? Yeah. Yeah, that's what we do. Okay, you warm it up, and sometimes it's a warm pan of water, sometimes it's a microwave, which you're not supposed to do. But sometimes you get sugar crystals in the bottom. They're just sugar crystals. You can use them as sugar. The other thing, this is kind of interesting. There are different grades of syrup. I mean, there's good syrup and there's not good syrup. And this just got changed like 5 years ago. There used to be grade A light amber and this whole list of things, and now everything's just grade A. But then with these designations of how much light is coming through, which is also what the color is. Okay, and it used to be that, boy, that golden, that lightest of light was the best stuff. And finally, the powers that be said, you know what, it's all good. As long as it doesn't have off flavors, as long as there's nothing that smells bad or tastes bad, or it's not cloudy, it's all good, because these all have a little different, subtle, different flavor, which again, I can't tell the difference. But how much light is coming through? The flavors, delicate, rich, or robust, strong flavor. Okay, I mean, like I said, I taste sugar and I taste smokiness, and it's just pure joy to me. And how much light is coming through. Okay, very interesting. That processing grade there on the bottom, processing grade, if it's cloudy, if it's off flavor, if there's something that's just a little wonky about it, they call that processing grade. And I really don't know what happens to that stuff. I've heard, like, sometimes they would use that in your Swisher Sweets cigars. Not that I would ever smoke Swisher Sweets cigars. Maybe. All right, yield. How much? You've gone through all this work. How much syrup are you going to get? It takes 45 gallons of sap to 1 gallon of syrup. 45 to 1. Give or take, there's some variability around there. Sometimes it's as low as 40. Sometimes it's as high as 50. On average, 1 quart of finished syrup per tap per year. 1 quart. So you do all this and you get 1 quart of syrup. Is it worth it? Yeah, nobody's answering. I'm not getting a, yeah, it's worth it. I'm not, I don't know. We'll come back to that in a sec. Silver maple, like I said, it can, some people say it has a vanilla type of flavor. I've never tasted plain or syrup that is solely from silver maple. I'd be very curious to see how it turns out. And then there are some places that say ours is organic maple syrup, which I kind of scratch my head at that, because if you do it, you're just collecting the sap from the tree and concentrating the sugar. What's not organic about that? I guess if you were spraying a pesticide, an insecticide in your trees because they've got some bug in them, I guess. So organic maple syrup does get a premium, another extra 10% or so. So Maple Sugaring Day, like I said, second Saturday in April at Fort Stevenson State Park, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. They've also have an Adopt a Tree program. The guy was telling me about this. This is kind of cool. For a donation, people will get a picture of the tree and some facts about it, but they'll also get a little bit of maple syrup and some other Pride of Dakota products that were made using their maple syrup. Kind of cool. So they do, I think he'd said about somewhere between 15 and 30 taps out at Fort Stevenson. So I was at the grocery store today. Before I came here, I had to buy some maple syrup. 1 gallon of water, orange juice, vinegar, canola oil, milk. What costs what? $139 is what? Yes, that's correct. $4.39 is milk. This was out of West Fargo, so maybe things are different here. What's the $14.49? Canola oil. Yeah. Okay. Canola oil's $14.49. OJ's $6.29. Milk was $5.99. Vinegar was $4.39. Yeah, water was the cheapest. Glad to hear that. How much does a gallon of finished maple syrup, a whole gallon, cost? $39.99. For only $39.99. Any others? 80. Okay. Oh, double. This is like The Price is Right. I bid $1. Yeah, okay, yeah. 60? Okay. This was in Ohio last week when I was there. It was $65. So yeah, you're 60. That is a lot of syrup, yes. Yes. So my point here is this stuff is valuable. If you're making it, don't give it to your 4-year-old kid who's just going to dump it on there. Give it to somebody who's going to appreciate it, value it, and treat it with respect. So, before we go on to the next part, any questions? Yeah.
So they don't package it in tins, containers anymore?
Some people, no, that is one option. I haven't seen that in a long time, but there are still those little, almost like a house, a log cabin, tin log cabin. Yeah, some people still do that. I think you're going to have to go to those maple producers, not to Hornbachers or Dan's. They're going to have glass or plastic. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
So those 3 maples that you mentioned, those are the only ones worth pursuing for tapping then?
So sugar, maple, box elder, and silver maple.
Yeah, those are the only ones then, or others maybe worth trying?
Well, around here, those are the only 3 you're going to get. They're going to get big enough. There's a red maple in the eastern U.S., and I've heard of people tapping that. It's like sugar, but I've also heard it's not as good as sugar. Sorry, it's like silver maple. It's not as good as silver maple. That it has even lower concentration of sugar, and that the flavor might be a little more off with a red maple. So I also think, I heard something about like Japanese maple in Japan that people collect sap from that, but I don't know. I always see those as just little shrubby things here in the U.S. and not here in North Dakota. They're just not cold hardy enough. So, okay. Anything else?
Is there a big jump in flavor from the box elder to the sugar maple?
You know, box elder to sugar maple, the one time I tried it, I couldn't tell you a difference.
My uncle made the box elder once, and I thought
Okay.
it was more like butterscotch flavored.
Okay. More butterscotch.
Is what I thought. But
Okay.
maybe he just processed it a little different. I don't
And
know.
maybe he did.
Burnt it? I don't know. A little bit. I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. And again, I don't have the palate to really tell these subtle differences. But that's a good question. Great question. Yeah.
I'm curious about the history of, have you ever looked into that? Like, who decided one day to just tap into a maple tree?
Yeah, well, native peoples did it all the time. And what they did is they're the ones who whittled the spiles. And I don't know how they collected it, in their birch buckets. And instead of boiling it in big pots, they actually would put hot rocks out of the fire into that sap and slowly heat it up and slowly get it to boiling. And so when the first European settlers came, and they came with these metal pots that they could put a fire underneath, it was just like this godsend to processing. Yeah, who's the person to milk a cow?
Too.
Yeah, they brought, there was that too.
When you pull this style out,
Uh-huh.
what prevents the sap from still running out? Nothing?
It's a great question. When you pull the spile out of the tree at the end of the season, what's going to stop the sap from running? Nothing but the tree itself. Okay, and I say it that way because if, again, you pull it when the trees start to bud out, when the leaves start to come out, and the sap mostly stops flowing then on its own. So the tree will stop, and the tree starts its wound healing process, which does tend to isolate that area as well. So yeah, some will come out, but not much. Some extra will come out. And you prune a tree, you prune a maple or a birch tree in the spring, they're bleeding. They're not bleeding, okay? But everybody says, oh, they're bleeding. They're not bleeding. It's just sap, water coming out of the soil, through with dissolved sugars coming out. That's all it is. Even if it's just a wound from a cut branch or a broken branch or the squirrels are up there.
So, speaking of birch trees, then, do they have a sugar concentration high enough?
Do birch trees have sugar concentration high enough? The paper birch doesn't, but there's one in the northeastern U.S. called sweet birch. I would just love to plant a bunch of those. And I think the birch has actually a little bit of a wintergreen flavor as well, along with that sweetness. Yeah.
How long does it take to fill a 5-gallon bucket for your
How long does it take to fill a 5-gallon bucket? It depends on the day. If the conditions are just right, you could fill it in a day. The tree could fill it in a day. If not, it could take 3, 4, or 5 days. If it's continually below freezing for 4 days, you're going to get nothing. If it's continuously above freezing for 4 days, you're going to get nothing. You really need that variability. And that said, the guy up at Fort Stevenson told me that really those conditions, the cold at night, warmth in the day, he really needs about a week of that before the trees even start flowing, before the sap even starts flowing. No, good question. Yeah, that's why so many amateurs or hobbyists do a batch. They wait till they have enough and then they invest the time into boiling it down. There's just not enough there to cycle it through. So, right. Yeah.
Does every tree flow some sap?
Does every tree flow some sap? I think so, but no, I take that back. The one, I was reading a little bit of a study out of Minnesota where, just out of curiosity, some college students were looking at sugar maple, box elder, silver maple, ironwood, and something else. Can't remember. But they said the ironwood and the something else, they tapped them, but nothing came out. Good question. So, yay college students. Should we have a taste test? Who wants to get all sugared up? Ryan, can you help me?
Yes.
Okay. So what we have here